Okay, well, let's just start off with some honesty this morning. We're among friends. How many of you consider yourself a control freak? How many? Okay, there's a couple of you. How many of you are sitting next to a control freak? Okay, there's more of you. How many of you are sitting next to a person who thinks they're sitting next to a control freak? All right, my name is Tim. I'm the lead pastor here at Grace, and we're really glad that you're here on this holiday weekend to consider something that's not something that we like to talk about a lot. So I think there's going to be some elbowing going on this service. Try to keep that to a minimum, if you will. But let's get into the passage, Proverbs chapter 3. I want all of us to read these verses out loud together. Here we go. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Friends, here's the irony about control. Is that you don't have it. You know, that's the reason why controllers are so freaked. That's why we call them control freaks, because they're freaked out about not having something that they think they should have or they think they do have. Last week, as we started this series, I mentioned that on average, an adult makes about 35,000 decisions every day. That's about 2 or 3 decisions every minute of your waking life. And what's really ironic with that is that all the decisions that you're making, one study asserts that human beings control less than 5% of their lives. So all of those decisions and 95% of your life is out of control, or at least out of your control. You didn't control the day of your birth, your gender, your physical, mental, emotional makeup, the fact that you were born in America in this time of history that determines so much of the outcomes of your life. You had no say in that. In American culture, we tell our children that they can be whatever they want to be, which as parents is probably the first lie we tell our children. They want to play in the NBA, and so they grow up to be 5'6", 120 pounds. God loves you, buddy, but it's not going to happen. Sorry about that. I mean, you can't control the weather. You can't control the economy. You can't control who will like you, who will not like you, who will love you, who will not love you. We have Celebrate Recovery here at Grace Fellowship, and when you begin that journey, this is one of the first principles you learn and live out. I realize I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control, and there's more to that statement, but I think that's enough for us today. I am powerless to control. I am not God. I am powerless to control. I am powerless to control. Say that with me. I am powerless to control. Like Dorothy on the yellow brick road. I am powerless to control. I am not God. I am powerless to control. You know the difference between you and God? God doesn't think he's you. One of the classic control stories in the New Testament is where Jesus shows up at that home of Martha and Lazarus. Mary and Martha are siblings in their close relationship with Jesus. And the two sisters are in a tiff. Actually, only one of them is in a tiff. The other one, the type B, the relaxed, the easygoing one, she's just fine, okay? She's not having a problem. But the other one is actually freaked out. And this happens a lot with control freaks. They get pretty irritated with people who don't get irritated. They don't like the easygoing one. So I'm going to read the story, and then we'll talk about controllers for a minute. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So Martha, the consummate controller, has 3 problems, and here's the first one. When you choose control, you do not rest. When I choose control, I do not rest. I can't rest. How can you take a break when you're running the world? I mean, how can you let that go? And it's an exhausting, never-ending endeavor. Controllers, they tend to be perfectionists. They want things done a certain way. They want people to do certain things in a certain way. Ladies, I'll just ask you ladies, what do you call the person who doesn't do what you want? Your husband, okay? And here's the thing, and we're talking about a story of a woman who has control issues, and I want to make this clear up front, that women are not the only ones with control issues. Men just don't think they have them, okay? So we just live in denial, and you guys recognize them, and so it's hard to keep your world spinning when you're depending on yourself and you're depending on other people to fall in line and cooperate, and it gets particularly troubling. Was Mary just clueless that Martha was huffing around the house, or was she purposely ignoring her? We'll never know, because Martha doesn't go to Mary, she goes to Jesus. Jesus, tell her to help me. Don't you care that she doesn't care? And Jesus says no. He says no. Have you ever said no to a controller? I mean, you have to be Jesus for that to go well. Jesus says no. I'm not going to tell Mary to help you. Now, Jesus is, I believe, is trying to convey to Martha that there are more important things in life than everybody bowing down to your agenda and getting things done your certain way, because you will wear yourself out trying to control everything and everyone. When I choose control, I do not rest. Secondly, when I choose control, I am not happy. I am not happy. Have you ever met a controller who was genuinely happy in life, happy about life, happy with those with whom they do life? They are just unhappy every way around. Jesus says to Martha, you're worried and upset. He calls her out. You are irritated. You're mad. When the world doesn't cooperate with your agenda, doesn't obey your orders, doesn't submit to your commands, you get resentful, you get angry, you get critical and judgmental. How many bowlers do we have in the room? Anybody like to bowl? Okay, not very many, so I'm going to pick on them. If you've ever been to a bowling alley, and most of us have, and this is true of any sport, but you go to a bowling alley and you see two types of bowlers. You've got one bowler, they brought their own ball in a glitter bag. They have a wrist guard with matching shoes. And so they stand just right. They straighten their stance. They hold their wrists in the right position. They measure their steps as they're walking toward the line, and they swing their arm with just enough energy, just enough force. They twist their body like a ballerina. I mean, it's beautiful to behold. It's majestic. It's poetic. It's awe-inspiring. And then you've got the clown next to them who thinks gutter balls are hilarious. I mean, that's why they went. I mean, they're throwing the ball between their legs. He doesn't know how to hold he doesn't want to know how to correct his stance. He doesn't want to know how to hold his wrist. He doesn't even know what a handicap is. He's just there to have fun. He just wants the ball. And so let's be honest, you sportsmen and women out there. I mean, this is true for everything in life, actually. I mean, it is hard for us to tolerate someone who doesn't take seriously what you take seriously. It is hard to be patient with a person who doesn't take as important the things that you take important. I know it's a sin to mock bowling, but seriously. I know what some of you are thinking right now, some of you controllers. If everybody was a Mary in this world, nothing would ever get done. Okay, I get that. Jesus understands that. Jesus was a serious person with a purpose to live out. But you see this in the Gospels. He also enjoyed life, which was part of his purpose. I don't think Jesus was minimizing Martha's desire to do well, but I do think that he was challenging her priorities in life. Now, this isn't in your outline, but you'll probably want to write this down. I want to give you 3 questions that you need to be asking yourself whenever you are tempted to take control of something or someone, okay? Three questions. Just stop yourself and ask this question. Number 1, is it worth my concern? Is this worth controlling? Is this worth my concern? What is it that you are tempted to control? Your kids, your spouse, your job, your recovery, your in-laws, you see something not to your liking, or let's be honest, maybe there's something in life that you actually think needs to be fixed. There's something that needs to be addressed. Here's the deal. Most controllers are not wrong about their assessment. They're just kind of wrong about their approach. Is this within my concern? This is kind of a pick your battles type question. Is this really worth battling over? Is this something that I really need to address? Or is this something that I really need to release? I need to be tolerant of. I need to let go of. Example, again, ladies, your husband never puts his clothes in the hamper. You've asked him to do that. You've told him to do that. You've nagged him to do that. For the last 15 years, you have nagged him to do that. He still doesn't do it. And here's the thing you need to realize, friends, you are making the wrong person angry. You're in a tiff, and he's just fine, okay? So let me just, this isn't marriage counseling, but just let me throw this out here. Here's something that you might consider. Stop picking up his clothes. When he runs out of underwear, he's going to do one of two things. He's going to start cooperating and helping you out, or he's going to learn to be comfortable in dirty underwear. Either way, you win, okay? It's off your back. You don't have to worry about it. Is it within my concern? Here's the second question you need to ask. Is it really mine to control? Is it really mine control? Now, you have to realize that God has given you a life. You need to be a steward of your life. You have responsibilities in life. Everyone does that they need to fulfill. There are some things in life that we are accountable for. And so this is kind of an own your own stuff kind of question. Do I need to own this? Is this my stuff to own? There is a difference, friends, between surrendering control and relinquishing responsibility. We don't want to relinquish responsibility. We want to surrender control. Again, for example, ladies, you're in a relationship with a guy who never picks up his clothes. Maybe you're in the middle of a relational breakdown and you have no control over the other person's life and how they respond to you and how they behave, but you are responsible for your own life, your own thoughts, your own attitudes, your own behaviors. You are accountable to God and how you live your life. No sin justifies your own, so you are not off the hook for your own stuff. So what in this situation, what is God calling you to do? And it could be a whole list of things. I mean, maybe you need to repent. Maybe you need to forgive. Maybe you need to seek reconciliation or establish boundaries or back away or move forward or go to counseling or celebrate recovery. What is within your control? And what needs to be released from your control? You need to pick your battles. You need to own your own stuff. And here's the third question. Does this really matter in the long term? Does this issue really matter when it comes to trying to control this person or this situation to your liking? Ask yourself, a year from now, 5, 10 years from now, is this issue really going to matter? This is a priority question. What is more important? What is most important in your life? We have 2 glass tables in our house, one in the dining room and one in the living room. Why you would do that with young children, I don't know, but we were foolish. But our kids, when they were little, they would crawl underneath those tables to a place where no grown-up could reach, and they would kiss the underside of the table, or they would write their name with greasy fingers, and it always drove one of the adults in that house crazy. Fingerprints everywhere, greasy lips, lip prints everywhere. How are we going to solve this problem? I mean, we could wear ourselves out constantly cleaning up this mess. We could make our own kids crawl back under that table and clean up their own mess. We could cut off their lips. Anything that, everything was on the table. But here's something to consider. You could realize that in 5, 10 years from now, these kids are going to grow up and they're not going to be home, and there will be no kiss marks underneath the table. And we will miss what drove us nuts. Friends, in the grand scheme of things, is clean, ordered, and perfect the most important? Because here's the deal. I mean, love requires freedom. Love requires freedom. You need to write that down. Love requires freedom. In a relationship with another human being, love requires freedom, and control snuffs out freedom. Love is a choice. And so the more you try to control that choice, the less love you have in that relationship. In relationships, it's either control or intimacy. You either control a person or you are close to that person, but you cannot have both. It's either control or intimacy. So let's get back to Martha for a second. Martha was unhappy with Mary. That relationship was not good. Mary was unhappy with Jesus. I mean, can you imagine being mad at the Son of God? Well, yes, you can, because you have been mad at the Son of God. He has not answered your prayer the way you've wanted. He's not always cooperated with the way you think things should go. Which was the point from Martha? Martha, you are so stressed, you're worried, you're irritated, you're upset about so many things that are outside of your control. And in the long term, I mean, you are in your attempt to control life, you are missing out on life. I cannot rest. I cannot be happy. And here's the third thing, friend. When I choose control, I cannot trust. I cannot trust. And this is at the heart of the issue. Your attempt to control is rooted in your inability or your unwillingness to trust God. You either control or you trust, but you can't do both. The reason you're freaked out about control is because you don't really have control anyway. The more you try to control, the more you're afraid of losing control. And the more afraid you're losing control, the more you try to control. And it just creates this never-ending cycle of fear. Fear, friends. Fear. You're afraid. You're afraid of what will happen if you don't try to control it. You're afraid of what's next if you don't have your hands on it. You're afraid of that God doesn't have this, that God's not going to come through, that he's not going to get it right, or he's not going to be on time. I mean, you would never say that out loud, but your anxiousness and your anger give you away. You would never confess that, but your lack of joy, your inability to let go gives you away. You don't trust God. So, let's read these verses one more time, and let's talk about surrender. Proverbs 3, let's read it out loud. Here we go. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Friends, when you trust in the Lord, and that is surrender, we're talking about surrender this morning. When you choose surrender, this verse tells us that he will straighten your path. In other words, he will make a way. He will work things out. He will put all things together for good. And it will make sense in the end. You will realize that his way was the best way. Because again, the reason you fear losing control is because you don't really have control to begin with. This life is spinning out of control, and you're trying so desperately to hold on to things, to hold things together. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your finances, and you don't know how to fix either. Maybe it is a relational breakdown, and you're clueless as to how to make that better. Maybe it's a hurt habit or hang-up that you can't find victory on. I mean, it's either people or circumstances, right? Something is either, someone isn't falling in line, or something is falling apart, and you don't know how to let go and let God, and it has sparked off a deep sense of fear in your life. You're afraid. Friends, trusting God is surrender, and it's in that surrender that we discover several things. First of all, when I surrender, I discover who I am. Who I am. Your attempt to control life is an act of replacing God in your life, and that's not who you are. Take a look at this verse, 2 Corinthians 4:7. It tells us three things in this verse. Number one, it tells us that we are jars of clay, that you are a jar of clay. Elsewhere, the Bible says that you are a mist that evaporates quickly, that you are like grass that's here today and gone tomorrow. You are a fragile jar of clay, which is to say, in the grand scheme of human history, you are a blip on the radar. You are feeble and frail and temporary. You are dust. You are mist. You are grass. And when you die, no one will remember you. In the light of the universe, you are simple and small and insignificant. Aren't you glad you came today? Feel good about yourself? But notice the second thing that this verse tells us, that in that fragile jar of clay, you possess a priceless treasure. God has created you in his image. He has redeemed you by his blood. He has housed within you his spirit. as insignificant as you are compared to the vast universe, you are incredibly loved and valued by God and created for a purpose. God knows your name. He knows your hopes and dreams. He knows when you hurt. He knows when you're worried and upset. He knows that you're trying to fix and control life. And he wants you to know that he is able. That's the third thing that we see in this verse. That all-surpassing power is from him. It's not from you. He is the one who is able to work all things together for good. His all-surpassing power is the one that can make things right, that can make a way. And the God who loves you like no one would ever love you, will ever love you. Which is the second point. When I choose surrender, I discover who I belong to. Who I belong to. Paul says in this passage, Philippians chapter 4, says that the peace of God will transcend your understanding and guard your heart. It is beyond your understanding, but will protect you. Now, here's the deal, friends. The more you are loved, the less you will control. That's good. Write that down. The more you are loved, the less you will control. You have control issues in your life, check the love factor in your life. The more you are loved, the less you will control. Because that's what control is. You're trying to make it right in your life. You're trying to make your life right. You're trying to make sure that your life is important and significant. The more you are loved, the less you are controlled. The need for control in your life is rooted in the lack of understanding of God's love for you, to whom you belong. You belong to a God who will never leave you nor forsake you. You belong to a God who is ultimately good and forever loving. You belong to a God who is able to do far more than you could possibly imagine for your life. When you surrender, you discover who you belong to. And thirdly, you discover what you are called to do. What you are called to do. Friends, we have been given a life that we are stewards. So we're not called to be irresponsible. We are called to be responsible. Martha was a responsible person, but she was worried and upset because she was taking on a job that did not belong to her. The greater your need to control, the greater the stress factor and the frustration factor and the irritation factor in your life. And here's what you need to know. You were never designed to take on the cares of the world. You were never designed to do life alone. That's why Jesus in this passage in Matthew 11 offers his yoke. Now, we live in a farming community, and so most of us understand a yoke. A yoke is a piece of farming equipment that binds two work animals together. It is different than a harness. Okay, a harness is strapped to one animal who carries the entire load. Jesus did not give you a harness. He's offering you a yoke, which means, friends, you were not designed for a harness. You were designed for a yoke. In other words, God gave you a life that's yours to live. You're created to be responsible, to be a good steward, but you were not created to be independent and on your own. When you are yoked to Jesus and you try to go your own way or do your own thing, friends, that's where the stress, that's where the frustration comes in. Life doesn't go well for you. When people are stressed, they do one of two things. I mean, they will either try to control even more or they will go passive and irresponsible and they just give up on life. Both of those responses create further stress. They just make things worse. Jesus isn't asking you to give up. He's just asking you to surrender what is not yours. You cannot do it without God. God will not do it without you. In 1942, Reinhold Niebuhr gave the world the Serenity Prayer, which has helped a lot of struggling addicts, control addicts, navigate life better. And I want you to read the first part of that Serenity Prayer with me. Here we go. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, that's the most familiar part of that prayer. Anyone who participates in AA or OA or NA and other recovery programs, a lot of those people don't realize that there's more to this prayer because that's the only part of the prayer that they memorize. I appreciate here at Celebrate Recovery, they've made use of the entire prayer, which continues like this: living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. I love that. The sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, friends. This is so good. This world, friends, this world will never be what you want it to be. People will never be what you want them to be. You will never be what you want you to be. Taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I what? What? Surrender. If I say it like you believe it. Surrender. If I surrender to his will. That I may be, and this is probably my favorite phrase in the whole prayer, that I may be reasonably happy. That I may be reasonably happy. Again, life will never be perfect. That doesn't mean you can't be happy. Life will not always work out the way that you want. That doesn't mean you can't find joy in the journey. That I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. There are people in this room right now. You love Jesus, you want to follow Jesus, but you're still calling the shots in your life. You're still trying to make people right and circumstances fixed, and you just don't understand why you're so unhappy when you're a Christian, and that's because you haven't surrendered these circumstances or these people to your life. There are people in this room right now who have never surrendered their life and followed Jesus, and you're trying to make life work on its own. Maybe today is the day when you finally decide and you finally realize that life will never be what it should be until I surrender to him, trust him, the only one who can make things right so that we can be reasonably happy in this life. By faith, to surrender your need to run your life and to control your world so that you can experience the abundance that God has for you. So I want to do something and close this morning. This is going to be uncomfortable for some of you, and just participate if you want. But I want to, every eye closed and every head bowed, if you would do that right now. Just close your eyes and bow your head. You're either trying to control a circumstance in your life and it's not working out, or you're trying to control a person in your life and they're not cooperating, and you're making the wrong person unhappy. What is it? Do you have something in your life, a circumstance or a person, that you need to release control of? And if that is true for you, I want you to stand right now. Would you stand? And I want to pray this prayer over you as we close this morning. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next.